Think about the last major decision you made. Maybe it was, I don't know, accepting a new job, buying a car, or even something as like seemingly trivial as agreeing to take on this massive weekend project for a coworker.
Right.
You probably weighed the pros and cons, right? You made the call. It
Mm.
felt completely, entirely under your control. But what if I told you that the choice wasn't actually yours?
Yeah, that's the scary part.
Right. Like, what if the steering wheel you thought you were gripping had this secondary hidden set of controls,
Mm.
and someone else was just quietly steering you right into their lane?
It's basically the ultimate illusion of autonomy. I mean, we
Yeah.
walk through life believing our logic dictates our actions, completely unaware of these invisible psychological currents that are just, pushing against our behavioral steering column.
Yeah.
And by the time you realize you're off course, you're already miles away from where you intended to be, basically executing someone else's agenda.
Which is exactly why we are pulling apart Travis Emotion's work today. We are doing a deep dive into this extensive guide, specifically the first book in his Emotional Intelligence Mastery series.
Dark psychology secrets.
Yes, Dark Psychology Secrets. And our mission here isn't to, study cartoon villains or fictional criminal masterminds. We're looking at the everyday dynamics of your office, your social circles, your relationships.
Absolutely. The real world.
Exactly. We're going to decode the dark triad, differentiate between a healthy social contract and toxic manipulation, and learn how to read the body's involuntary signals. Oh, and most importantly, build a psychological firewall to protect your autonomy.
Which is so crucial.
So, okay, let's unpack this because dark psychology sounds like this forbidden science, but it's actually just an omnipresent part of human communication.
It really is. I mean, the term certainly has a dramatic flair to it, but the foundational concept is highly practical. The psychological tools of influence, whether we're talking about, building rapport, creating urgency, framing a narrative, they are inherently neutral.
Right, there's just tools.
Exactly. They're just mechanisms of the human mind. The difference between ethical persuasion and dark psychology is, well, it's entirely rooted in intention and transparency.
So it's basically the difference between, say, a doctor convincing you to take life-saving medication and a con artist convincing you to buy snake oil.
That's a great way to put it.
The mechanism of building that trust might be the exact same, but the destination is entirely different.
Right. That captures the dynamic perfectly. Persuasion aims to benefit the target, or at least it operates in the open, creating a win-win.
Like a car salesman.
Yeah, exactly. The classic car salesman example from the source. You know you're being sold a car, and the salesman wants a commission. If he pushes a car that genuinely fits your lifestyle, that's ethical persuasion.
But if he pushes a lemon just for the bonus.
Right. While pretending to care about your family's safety, that's manipulation. Dark psychology operates covertly. The influencer attempts to bypass your critical thinking to extract a benefit solely for themselves.
Leaving you totally depleted. And the architects of that specific covert extraction, they usually fall into this clinical grouping that the book talks about, known as the dark triad.
The famous dark triad, yes.
Yeah. And for anyone listening who keeps up with psychology, you already know the big three, right?
Yeah.
Narcissists, psychopaths, and Machiavellians. We see these terms thrown around on social media every single day.
Oh, constantly. Everyone's ex is a narcissist these days.
Right. But let's get past the pop culture definitions. Travis Emotion isolates how these profiles actually function mechanically in the wild. So let's look at narcissism first. We aren't just talking about someone who takes too many selfies.
Far from it. I mean, in a high-stakes environment, say, a corporate boardroom, a true narcissist operates this reality distortion field. Their grandiose self-image requires constant admiration and a belief in their own absolute infallibility.
They can never be wrong.
Never. The dark psychology aspect comes into play when reality actually contradicts their perfection. They don't experience self-reflection. Instead, they manipulate the environment to shift the blame.
They just rewrite history.
Completely. They'll gaslight colleagues, distort reality, and intentionally exhaust your cognitive load with circular arguments until you just agree with their version of events.
Just to get them to stop talking.
Exactly, just to find peace.
They wear down your prefrontal cortex until compliance is just easier than resistance. So that's the narcissist. Then we have psychopaths. And the text makes a really vital distinction here, which I think is fascinating. We have to separate the clinical psychopath from the, violent serial killer trope we see in movies.
Yes, that is such a critical detail. The defining characteristic of psychopathy isn't violence. It's a profound neurological deficit in empathy and remorse, coupled with impulsivity and superficial charm.
So they just don't feel it.
They don't. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that specific cocktail of traits can actually be an overwhelming advantage in certain modern environments.
Like Wall Street or politics.
Oh, absolutely. A high-functioning psychopath can lay off 1,000 employees or ruthlessly undercut a competitor without a single spike in cortisol. Their heart rate literally doesn't change. Because they don't form emotional connections, they view human beings strictly as utilities.
Wow. Just a completely frictionless operating system.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the third one, the Machiavellian, named after Niccolo Machiavelli. This one feels like the most, I don't know, calculated of the three.
They are.
Because they share that absolute lack of empathy, but they aren't impulsive like a psychopath, right?
Right.
And they don't have the fragile ego of a narcissist.
Right. They're purely strategic. They operate on the belief that the ends justify the means. Machiavellians actually thrive in moral ambiguity. They possess this extreme, calculated patience. They prefer subtle tactics.
So it's basically like they're playing a giant game of chess, but the people around them have absolutely no idea they've been drafted as pawns.
That is exactly it. You believe you're making spontaneous choices, but your environment has been meticulously curated over months or even years to limit your options to the exact outcome the Machiavellian wants.
Okay, so if these three profiles are the predators, who are they hunting? Who's the target? The book points heavily toward this idea of the empath.
Yes, the empath.
And again, to demystify that a bit, we're talking about individuals driven deeply by compassion and a desire to heal others. But why are they the prime target?
Well, it comes down to the mechanics of guilt. An empath naturally projects their own moral framework onto others, assuming everyone else values fairness and kindness too.
Right, they think everyone plays by the same rules.
Exactly. So when a manipulator introduces a manufactured crisis or plays the victim, the empath's neurological response is to step in and fix it. The dark triad exploits that. They don't have to force the empath to do anything. They simply trigger that sense of obligation.
So the empath's own guilt basically does the heavy lifting.
Precisely. They hijack the empathy. And the way they deliver that hack is by weaponizing the fundamental principles of human persuasion.
Okay, yes, let's talk about those. The 6 principles of persuasion: reciprocity, authority, likability, scarcity, social proof, and consistency.
The classics.
The classics, yeah. But I want to push back on this a little bit, or at least find the boundary line here. Let's take the principle of reciprocity. If I say, bring a coffee to the IT manager on a Monday, fully knowing that I might need him to expedite a laptop repair for me on Thursday.
Wow.
Wait, isn't that manipulation? Even if I'm not a psychopath.
That's a really common question. You are engaging in a foundational human social contract there, but the nuance is in the proportionality and the lack of deception.
Okay, explain that.
Evolution built reciprocity to ensure group survival. You share resources today, I protect you tomorrow. Bringing coffee to the IT manager is a transparent, low-stakes exchange. You are both benefiting. It builds social cohesion.
Right, it's just normal human interaction.
Yeah. Yes. But dark manipulation weaponizes that exact same instinct and removes the empathy entirely. A Machiavellian might do an unsolicited, highly visible favor for you, but they don't want a coffee in return.
They want your soul.
Basically. They will hold that favor over your head for months, creating this crushing, disproportionate sense of indebtedness. And eventually, they cash it in to force you to back them in a major ethical breach or something. It's ruthless exploitation.
Wow, okay. So since manipulation is covert by nature, the words these manipulators use are usually just lies. To catch them, we have to look at what they aren't saying. Which brings us to body language.
The unspoken truth.
Yes. The book introduces Albert Mehrabian's 7-38-55 rule. Can you break that down?
Absolutely. So while the exact percentages can fluctuate based on context, Mehrabian's core finding is that a staggering amount of human communication, roughly 55%, is nonverbal.
Wait, 55% is just body language?
Yes. Another 38% is vocal tone. So that leaves only about 7% for the actual semantic meaning of the words.
That is wild. So if I'm only listening to what a toxic colleague is saying, I am missing over 90% of the actual data in the room.
Exactly. The conscious mind is brilliant at constructing a logical lie, but the body is hardwired to leak the truth. And this is where we get into the facial action coding system, or FACS.
Oh, right, the microexpressions.
Yes. The human face has muscles that create involuntary microexpressions. They flash across the face in a fraction of a second. For instance, a genuine smile.
The Duchenne smile. Right.
The Duchenne smile, it requires the involuntary contraction of the muscle around the eye, creating those little crow's feet. You cannot consciously flex this easily. But a fake smile,
A Pan Am smile.
exactly, used to feign agreement, usually only involves the mouth. The mouth lies, but the eyes remain completely unengaged.
The eyes don't crinkle. But the text also points out something much further away from the brain, which is the feet.
The feet are arguably the most honest part of the human body.
Really? Why the feet?
Because we rarely dedicate conscious cognitive load to managing them. We spend all our energy controlling our face and our hands. But if someone is verbally agreeing with you, yet their feet are pointed squarely toward the door,
They want to get out of there.
their limbic system is signaling a desire to escape, their body is literally preparing for flight.
That makes so much sense. And then there is the biological anomaly of the nose touch. When I read this in the source, it was just fascinating. People don't just touch their nose because they're nervous. There is an actual chemical reaction happening.
It is a brilliant biological fact. When someone engages in high-stakes deception, the stress triggers a release of a chemical called catecholamine into the bloodstream.
Catecholamine. Okay.
Right. And these neurotransmitters cause the tissues inside the nasal cavity to swell with blood. This swelling creates a physical itching sensation. The liar will subconsciously touch or scratch their nose to alleviate the itch they literally just induced by lying. The book even references the famous Bill Clinton testimony as a prime example of this.
Oh, wow. The Bill Clinton example. Yes. He touched his nose so many times during that. But let me ask you this. If I'm in a meeting and someone crosses their arms, everyone always says, oh, they're being defensive. But what if the room is just freezing cold? Are we just misreading them?
That is the exact danger of amateur analysis. A single gesture is a word. It is not a sentence.
I like that.
To read the unspoken language accurately, you must look for clusters of cues, and you have to establish a baseline. If they cross their arms, they might just be cold. But if they cross their arms, their smile doesn't reach their eyes, and their feet pivot toward the exit.
Now you have a cluster.
Exactly. Context and clusters are everything.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because we've discussed everyday influence and lying. But what happens when the dark triad escalates their tactics? Like taking over someone's autonomy completely. Covert emotional manipulation and mind control.
This is the deep end. And what's fascinating here is that mind control isn't just for conspiracy theories. It follows a very structural path.
How does it start?
Manipulators first hijack basic survival emotions, specifically fear, guilt, and sadness. By constantly triggering these, the manipulator clouds the victim's logic. You literally cannot think clearly.
Because your brain is just overwhelmed.
Right. And then comes the brainwashing structure. The manipulator must first become a highly trusted party, often masking their intent as benevolence. Once trust is established, the critical phase begins. Isolation.
Isolating them from friends and family.
Yes. They systematically cut the victim off from their support systems to create total dependency. Eventually, they rewrite the victim's entire reality.
So it's basically like covert emotional manipulation is like someone subtly changing the temperature in the room until you pass out. But mind control is like a computer virus. It disguises itself as a helpful software update, but once it's inside, it just deletes your entire operating system.
That is a terrifyingly accurate analogy. Once you are isolated, the virus is the only program running.
Okay, after exploring all these dark depths, it is time to equip everyone with some armor. This shield. How do we protect ourselves?
The absolute foundation of your defense is emotional intelligence, or EQ.
Using EQ as a weapon.
Exactly. Manipulators prey on those with low self-awareness. By mastering your own emotions through emotional mindfulness, deep breathing, grounding techniques, you eliminate the very buttons manipulators are trying to push.
Because you actually know what you're feeling and why. What about practical, everyday defenses?
You have to set boundaries. And you have to learn to say no and actually mean it without feeling guilty.
Which is so hard for the empath.
It is, but you have to recognize your basic human rights.
Yeah.
You have the right to respect, the right to say no, and the right to protect your mental health.
Yeah. The text also talks about the victim triangle, right?
The dreaded drama triangle, yes. Victim, rescuer, persecutor.
How does that work?
Manipulators love to play the victim to force you into the rescuer role, or they act as the persecutor to make you feel powerless. You have to refuse to step onto that board.
Don't even play the game. You know, I think the ultimate shortcut for a manipulator is just finding someone with low self-esteem. If you recognize your own worth, you instantly become too much work for a manipulator. They want an easy target. Don't be one.
Exactly. Make yourself too expensive to manipulate.
I love that. So what does this all mean for you? Let's recap this journey. We went from understanding the dark triad, the narcissist, the psychopath, the Machiavellian, to exploring the spectrum of persuasion versus manipulation.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. We learned how to read the truth in someone's feet and their nose, and finally how to use emotional intelligence and boundaries as a protective shield. You now possess the blueprint of the manipulator's playbook. You have the power to step back, observe, and protect your own free will.
And as a final thought to leave you with, we've talked so much about how to spot manipulators who use these psychological principles maliciously. But given that human beings are constantly emitting nonverbal cues and naturally relying on principles like reciprocity and likability every single day, how much of our normal, everyday communication is actually just a mild, unconscious form of manipulation? Are we ever truly making choices entirely free from the subtle influence of everyone around us?
Wow. That is definitely something to chew on. Thank you so much for joining us on this custom deep dive. Stay curious, keep learning, and keep your shields up.